Elena Martinez sat perfectly still in the leather chair behind her desk, the kind of chair that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Outside her floor-to-ceiling window, downtown Austin glittered under a late afternoon sun, all glass towers and ambition. Inside, the air was cool, quiet, and smelled faintly of lemon polish and expensive coffee. She looked like she belonged there, sharp blazer, hair pulled back in a neat twist, eyes steady behind designer glasses. To anyone passing by, she was the picture of control, the kind of woman who never stumbled, never doubted, never needed help, but inside, something was wrong. It had started that morning, a strange heaviness in her right arm like it didn't quite belong to her. She'd brushed it off. Too much stress, too little sleep. She'd been finalizing a merger that could double her company's valuation, and sleep had been a luxury for weeks. By lunch, her words felt thick on her tongue like she was speaking through cotton. Still, she powered through a board meeting, nodding at the right moments, scribbling notes with her left hand when her right refused to cooperate. No one noticed. Or if they did, they said nothing. In her world, weakness was invisible, or it was punished. Then, halfway through a video call with investors in Singapore, her vision blurred. The screen swam. Her right leg went numb. She tried to stand, to shake it off, but her body wouldn't listen. She collapsed. Not dramatically, no crashing to the floor, but a slow, helpless slide from her chair onto the plush carpet. Her assistant found her 10 minutes later, curled on her side trying to form the words, "Call 911, but only managing a garbled whisper. The ambulance came fast. The hospital was a blur of bright lights, beeping machines, and urgent voices. A CT scan confirmed it, a stroke. Not massive, but enough. Enough to steal her balance, her speech, her independence, all in one cruel afternoon. Now, 3 weeks later, she was in a rehabilitation center on the edge of town, far from the skyline she once commanded. The room was small, clean, and impersonal. Beige walls, a narrow bed, a walker parked beside the bathroom door like a silent guard. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by soft cotton pants and loose t-shirts that didn't require buttons or zippers. Her phone buzzed less and less each day. At first, her board members called daily. "How are you holding up, Elena? We're keeping your seat warm." But soon the calls became texts, then emails, then silence. The company moved on. Someone else was running meetings. Someone else was signing contracts. Someone else was wearing the crown she'd spent 20 years forging. She tried to tell herself it was fine, temporary. She'd fought harder battles. She'd clawed her way up from a cramped apartment in San Antonio, raised by a single mother who worked double shifts at a diner. She'd been told she wasn't leadership material, too emotional, too Latina, too much. She'd proven them all wrong. She could prove this wrong too. But at night, when the hallway lights dimmed and the nurse's footsteps faded, the truth crept in. She couldn't button her own shirt. She dropped her fork more often than not. Her right hand trembled when she tried to write her name. And when she looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize the woman staring back, pale, tired, eyes shadowed with fear. The woman who used to command rooms now struggled to lift a glass of water without spilling. One evening, after a particularly grueling session with her physical therapist, where she'd failed, again to take 5 steps without the walker, she sat on the edge of her bed, breathing hard. Her therapist had been kind, encouraging even, but Elena heard the unspoken message, "You're not progressing fast enough." She knew the insurance clock was ticking. 30 days of rehab covered. After that, out of luck, the nurse came in to check her vitals. "All set for the night, Ms. Martinez?" she asked cheerfully, jotting numbers on a clipboard. Elena nodded, not trusting her voice. "Lights out in 10, the nurse said, already heading for the door. "Sleep well." And just like that, she was alone again. The silence pressed in. Outside, a car passed. Somewhere down the hall, a TV murmured. But in her room, it was just her, and the awful echoing quiet of being truly, deeply alone. She thought of her ex-husband. They'd divorced 2 years ago, amicably enough on paper, but really because they'd both chosen work over each other. He'd remarried quickly, posted photos of tropical vacations on Instagram. She hadn't spoken to her younger sister in over a year, not since their last argument about their mother's care. Her parents were gone. Friends? Most had been colleagues, and colleagues vanished when you stopped being useful. She was 48 years old. With a 7-figure net worth and no one to call at 2 a.m., when the fear got too loud. Tears came then, not the dignified kind, but hot, messy sobs that shook her whole body. She tried to stifle them, pressing her good hand over her mouth, but it was no use. The dam had broken. She cried for the body that betrayed her, for the life that slipped through her fingers, for the terrifying thought that maybe this was it. This small room, this slow decline, this loneliness, and then, as the nurse's footsteps disappeared down the hall for the last time that night, Elena whispered into the dark, her voice cracked and raw, "Please, don't leave me here alone." It wasn't a command. It wasn't even really a plea to anyone in particular. It was just the truth spoken aloud for the first time. She was scared. She was broken. And she was so alone. She didn't expect an answer. There was no one to hear her, but someone did. Across the hall in room 312, a man paused with his hand on the light switch. He'd been standing by his open door, stretching his leg after his own therapy session, when he heard it, the quiet, desperate cry from the woman in 314. He hadn't spoken to her much. They'd nodded in the hallway once or twice, exchanged a good morning in the therapy gym. He knew she was the CEO type, always dressed neatly even in sweatpants, always sitting straight, always avoiding eye contact like she was guarding a secret. But tonight, that armor had cracked. He stood there for a long moment, listening to the muffled sound of her crying. He knew that sound. He'd made it himself, late at night after his wife passed, when his daughter was asleep in the next room and he didn't know how he'd keep going. He also knew that in places like this, people pretended not to hear. It was easier that way, less messy. But something in her voice, the raw vulnerability, the sheer exhaustion of it, pierced through his usual reserve. He didn't go in. That wouldn't be right. But he didn't close his door either. He left it open a crack, a silent signal. You're not the only one awake. You're not the only one hurting. And for the first time in weeks, Elena wasn't entirely alone in the dark. The next morning, she woke with puffy eyes and a stiff neck, ashamed of her breakdown. She washed her face, brushed her teeth with her left hand, and practiced standing without support. She would not fall apart again. She couldn't afford to. But when she opened her door to head to breakfast, she found a small paper cup of coffee sitting on the floor outside. It was still warm. Next to it, a folded note in neat, slightly shaky handwriting. Hospital coffee's terrible, but it's hot. Room 312. She stared at it for a long time. Then slowly she picked it up. The warmth seeped into her fingers. She took a sip. It was terrible, bitter, watery, barely coffee at all. But it was the kindest thing anyone had done for her in months. She didn't know who he was. She didn't know his name. But for the first time since the stroke, she felt seen, not as a CEO, not as a patient, but as a person. And that small cup of bad coffee was the first thread in a lifeline she didn't even know she needed. The man in room 312 didn't expect anything to come of that coffee. He'd left it out of habit more than anything, a reflex from years of caring for others. When his wife was sick, he used to bring her tea every morning, even on the days she couldn't drink it. After she passed, he kept making it for his daughter just to feel useful. Now stuck in this rehab center with a leg that still screamed every time he put weight on it, he didn't have much to offer. But coffee? That he could do. He watched from his doorway as the woman from 314 picked up the cup. He saw her hesitate, then take a slow sip. He couldn't read her expression from that distance, but she didn't throw it away. That felt like a win. He hadn't planned to talk to her. People here kept to themselves. Some were healing from accidents, others from surgeries. A few from things no one talked about. Everyone carried their own quiet storm. He respected that. But the next morning, when he saw her struggling to open a jar of applesauce at breakfast, her right hand fumbling, her jaw tight with frustration, he found himself walking over. "Need a hand?" he asked, keeping his voice low, not drawing attention. She looked up, startled. For a second, he thought she might say no. Pride flickered in her eyes, the kind he recognized from his own mirror on bad days. But then she nodded, just slightly, and pushed the jar toward him. He opened it easily with his left hand. His right was still wrapped in a brace from the accident, and set it back in front of her. "They make these things like they're sealed by NASA," he said with a small smile. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a moment, the clink of spoons and distant chatter filling the space. He noticed how she held her spoon in her left hand now, how she moved slowly, deliberately, like every motion cost her something. He also noticed the way she scanned the room, not with curiosity, but with the sharp awareness of someone used to reading people. Used to being in charge. I'm in 312, he said finally, not sure why he was offering more. If you ever need anything, like if your TV remote acts up or something. She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes were tired but clear. I'm in 314, she said. And I think my remote's already broken. He laughed. A real surprised laugh that made his ribs ache a little. Yeah, mine too. Feels like they hand out broken ones on purpose, that was it. No names, no life stories. Just two strangers sharing a moment over terrible hospital food and malfunctioning electronics. But it was enough. Over the next few days, small things began to happen. He'd see her in the hallway and nod. She'd wave back. Once, when she dropped her water bottle during physical therapy, he was the one who picked it up before the aide could get to it. Another time, she waited by the elevator when she saw him limping toward it, holding the door with her good arm. They started eating breakfast together, not by plan, just by quiet agreement. He'd save her a seat. She'd bring extra napkins. They didn't talk much at first. He told her about the weather. She mentioned the book she was trying to read, though her eyes got tired fast. But slowly the silence between them became comfortable instead of heavy. He learned she'd been a CEO, not from her, he never asked, but from overhearing a nurse say, "That's the tech company lady." He didn't treat her differently because of it. If anything, he treated her like anyone else who'd taken a hard fall and was trying to stand back up. One rainy afternoon, they found themselves in the therapy gym at the same time. She was working on balance, holding onto parallel bars, sweat beading on her forehead as she tried to shift her weight. He was doing leg lifts, grimacing with each movement. Their therapists were chatting by the water cooler, giving them a rare moment alone. "You're getting better," he said, watching her steady herself. She shook her head. "Not fast enough. Who decides what's fast enough?" She didn't answer right away. Then quietly, "Me." He nodded. He understood that too well. "I used to think I had to be back on a construction site in 6 weeks," he said. 3 months in, I can barely walk to the mailbox. What happened?" she asked, surprising herself. She hadn't meant to pry. "Fell from a second-story scaffold," he said simply. "Safety harness failed. Broke my femur, tore up my knee. Boss said I'd be back in no time. Turns out bodies don't care about deadlines." She looked at him, really looked. She saw the faded tattoo on his forearm, the calluses on his hands even now, the way he carried himself like he was used to lifting heavy things, both physical and emotional. "You have kids?" she asked. "One daughter," he said, and his whole face softened. 8 years old, staying with my sister while I'm here. She must miss you." "Every day," he said. "We video call every night. She shows me her drawings. Tells me about school. Last week she asked if I was coming home soon." He paused. I didn't know what to tell her. Elena felt something twist in her chest. She thought of all the calls she never made, all the birthdays she missed because of urgent meetings. "Do you talk to her about what happened?" "Some," he said. "I don't want to scare her, but I don't want her to think I just disappeared either, so I tell her the truth, just gently. Daddy's leg is healing. It takes time, but I'm getting stronger. She believes me." "Kids do that, they believe you can fix anything." Elena looked down at her own hands. "I don't have kids," she said. "Never had the time." He didn't say, "You should have made time," or "It's not too late." He just nodded. "Time's a funny thing," he said. "Sometimes you think you're saving it, but really you're losing it." She didn't respond. But she remembered those words later, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. A few days later, she overheard him arguing softly with someone on the phone, his insurance company. His voice was calm but strained. "I understand the policy says 30 days, but I'm not ready to go back to work. My doctor said I need more therapy." He listened for a moment, then sighed. "No, I don't have short-term disability. I was a contractor." He hung up and sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands. Elena watched from her doorway. She knew that look, the mix of anger, helplessness, and fear. She'd seen it in the mirror too many times. The next morning at breakfast, she slid a folded piece of paper across the table. "I used to negotiate contracts for a living," she said. "This is a draft letter to your insurer. It cites the medical necessity clause in your policy. They can't deny coverage if your doctor confirms you're not medically cleared. He stared at the paper like it was gold. You did this for me? You left me coffee, she said with a small shrug. Fair trade. He read it carefully. It was clear, firm, professional, but not aggressive. Exactly what he needed. Thank you, he said. And this time it carried the weight of everything he couldn't say. Their routine deepened. Mornings breakfast together. Afternoons therapy, sometimes in the same room. Evenings. Sitting in the common area, him watching the news, her trying to read. Both pretending they weren't keeping each other company. One evening, the rehab center hosted a family night. Most patients had visitors, spouses, parents, kids. He got a video call from his daughter, who waved excitedly from his sister's living room, holding up a drawing of the two of them holding hands under a rainbow. Elena sat alone in the corner, pretending to be absorbed in a magazine. He saw her. He always saw her. After the call ended, he walked over. She wanted me to tell you hi, he said. Elena looked up confused. Me? She saw you sitting here yesterday. Said you looked sad. Asked if you had anyone. Elena's throat tightened. I don't. He didn't offer empty comfort. Instead, he sat down beside her. Want to see her drawing? He showed her the tablet. The stick figure version of him had a big bandage on his leg. The stick figure Elena, labeled CEO Lady, had a crown and a cane. They were standing side by side, smiling. She thinks you're a queen, he said softly. Elena blinked fast. Tell her I said thank you, and that her drawing is beautiful, he did. And that night, for the first time, Elena didn't cry alone. As the weeks passed, they began to rely on each other in small, unspoken ways. He'd help her carry her laundry basket. She'd remind him to take his pain meds on time. When her speech therapy got frustrating and she couldn't find the right words, he'd wait patiently, never finishing her sentences, just giving her space to find them herself. One afternoon, during a rare moment of sunshine, they sat outside on a bench. The air smelled like wet grass and spring. She was quiet for a long time. I used to think strength meant never needing anyone, she said finally. He nodded. I used to think it meant doing everything alone. They sat in silence, watching a sparrow hop across the pavement. Do you ever feel like you're not the same person anymore? She asked. Every day, he said. But maybe that's okay. Maybe the old versions of us couldn't handle what we're going through now. Maybe we needed to become someone new. She looked at him then, not as the quiet man from across the hall, but as someone who understood the language of loss, of rebuilding, of quiet courage. And for the first time since the stroke, she didn't feel broken. She felt seen. She felt human. And that, more than any therapy session, more than any medication, began to heal her. The days began to blur together, not in the dull, dragging way they had before, but with a rhythm that felt almost like music. Mornings started with the soft knock on her door, never too early, never too loud, followed by the familiar scent of coffee, still terrible but now comforting in its predictability. She'd open the door to find him already halfway down the hall, leaning on his cane, but always waiting just long enough to make sure she was up and steady before heading to the dining room. They didn't talk about big things right away. No grand confessions, no dramatic revelations. Instead, they built trust in the small spaces between words, in the way he'd slide the sugar packets toward her without being asked, or how she'd notice when his knee was bothering him, and quietly suggest they take the longer route back to their rooms to avoid the stairs. But slowly, as trust does, the walls came down. One rainy Tuesday, during a lull in physical therapy, she found herself watching him struggle with a shoelace. His fingers fumbled with the knot, his jaw tight with frustration. She remembered how just weeks ago she couldn't tie her own shoes either. Without thinking, she knelt beside him, carefully using the arm of a nearby chair for balance, and took the lace from his hands. Let me, she said. He didn't protest. Just watched as her left hand, still unsteady but determined, worked the knot loose and retied it in a double bow. When she looked up, he was smiling, not out of pity, but gratitude. You've gotten good at that, he said. I had a good teacher, she replied. And they both knew she wasn't talking about the occupational therapist. Later that week, during speech practice, she stumbled over a simple sentence. The words tangled in her mouth like knotted thread. She felt the old shame rise, the hot flush of embarrassment, the urge to shut down. But instead of looking away, he stayed right there, patient, eyes steady. "Take your time," he said. "I'm not going anywhere," and just like that, the knot loosened. The words came. It was in these moments that they began to share more, not because they planned to, but because it felt safe. One evening, while folding laundry in the common room, a task they'd unofficially claimed as theirs to avoid the noisy TV crowd, he told her about his wife. She loved gardening, he said, smoothing out a tiny t-shirt that belonged to his daughter. "Even in our tiny backyard, she'd grow tomatoes, peppers, sunflowers," said it reminded her that good things take time. He paused, folding the shirt with extra care. "She got sick fast. 1 month she was planting seeds, the next she was in hospice. I didn't know how to be both a husband and a dad at the same time, but I had to be." Elena listened, her hand still on a towel. "Did you ever feel like you weren't enough?" "Every single day," he said without hesitation. "Still do sometimes," she nodded. "I built a company from nothing, raised millions in funding, sat on panels with people who shaped the future. But when my mother was dying, I missed her last 3 calls because I was in a critical strategy session." Her voice cracked. "I told myself it was important, but now I wonder, what was more important than saying goodbye?" He didn't offer empty reassurance. Didn't say, "You did your best," or "She understood." He just reached over and gently placed his hand over hers for a second. Just long enough to say, "I hear you," before going back to folding. That small gesture meant more than any platitude ever could. As their connection deepened, so did their practical help for each other. She noticed he kept getting calls from his insurance company, each one leaving him more defeated. One afternoon, she asked to see his policy documents. He handed them over without question. For 2 days, she pored over the dense, jargon-filled pages during her quiet hours. She used to negotiate billion-dollar deals. Insurance fine print was child's play. She found the loophole, the clause that required continued coverage if a licensed physician certified ongoing medical need. She drafted a letter, clear and firm, citing regulations, attaching his doctor's notes, and even included a timeline of his progress to prove he was actively participating in rehab. When she gave it to him, he read it twice. This is perfect," he said, voice thick. "How did you—" "I used to do this for a living," she said simply. "Now I'm doing it for a friend." He looked at her, really looked. "You're more than that," he said quietly. "You're the reason I haven't given up." She didn't know what to say to that, so she just nodded and went back to her crossword puzzle. In return, he became her anchor in the physical world. When her balance failed during a walk and she nearly fell, he was there to catch her. Not with a dramatic grab, but with a steady presence, his arm under hers before she even hit the ground. He taught her tricks he'd learned, how to shift weight without straining, how to use a cane without looking like you were surrendering, how to breathe through the frustration when your body won't obey. "You're not weak for needing help," he told her once, after she'd snapped at a therapist out of sheer exhaustion. "You're brave for asking for it." She'd never thought of it that way. One Saturday, the rehab center hosted a small art session, painting with watercolors. Most patients skipped it, but he convinced her to try. "It's just paper and water," he said. "No pressure." She sat stiffly at the table, brush in her left hand, unsure. He painted a simple tree, trunk thick, branches reaching. She tried to paint a bird, but it came out lopsided, the wings uneven. "I can't even do this right," she muttered, ready to crumple the paper. But he stopped her. "Look again," he said. "It's not about perfect. It's about trying. And your bird? It's flying. That's what matters." She kept the painting, taped it to the wall above her bed. Every morning she'd look at that crooked bird and remember, it's flying. Their bond wasn't romantic. There was no flirtation, no longing glances. It was deeper than that. It was the quiet understanding between two people who had been broken open and were learning, slowly, how to hold themselves together again, not alone but side by side. One evening, as they sat on the bench outside watching fireflies blink in the dusk, she asked, "What will you do when you leave here?" He sighed. "I don't know. My old job. They won't take me back. Not with this leg. And I can't afford to be out of work. My sister's been amazing with my daughter, but I can't ask her to keep doing it forever." "What did you do before?" she asked. "Construction. Mostly home renovations, kitchens, bathrooms, decks. I liked making things people could live in, you know?" Not just build, but create a space where families could grow. She was quiet for a long time. Then, "You're good with your hands. You understand how things fit together. You care about the details." He smiled faintly. "Used to." "You still do?" she said firmly. "I've seen you fix the coffee machine in the lounge. You helped that nurse reassemble her broken walker. You notice things." He looked at her, surprised. "You've been paying attention." "Hard not to," she said, and for the first time there was a hint of playfulness in her voice. Later that night, lying in bed, she couldn't sleep. His words echoed in her mind. "I can't afford to be out of work." She thought about her own future: empty penthouse, silent phone, a boardroom that no longer needed her. She had money, yes, but purpose? Connection? Those couldn't be bought. And then an idea began to form. Not fully shaped, not yet solid, but there, like a seed in dark soil. The next morning over breakfast, she didn't mention it. But she watched him, the way he carefully cut his toast into small pieces so it wouldn't fall off his fork, the way he always made sure her water glass was full, the way he carried his pain without complaint. This man had shown up for her when no one else did. Maybe it was time she showed up for him. But she needed to be sure, so she waited. She watched. She listened, and what she saw was someone who didn't just survive hardship, he helped others through it. Who didn't just endure loss, he made space for joy anyway. Who didn't just rebuild his own life, he reached back to pull others up with him. One afternoon, during a rare quiet moment in the therapy gym, she asked, "If you could build anything, anything at all, what would it be?" He didn't hesitate. A home, not just a house. A place where someone feels safe. Where a kid can leave muddy shoes by the door and a parent can sit on the porch and breathe. "That's what I always wanted to give my daughter." She nodded. "That's a good dream." "It's just a dream," he said, shrugging. "Dreams don't pay bills." "Maybe not," she said slowly. "But sometimes they can." He looked at her, puzzled. She didn't explain. Not yet. But something had shifted. The seed was sprouting. In the days that followed, she began to see their future. Not as separate paths diverging, but as two streams joining into something stronger. She had the business mind, the discipline, the ability to plan and execute. He had the skill, the heart, the hands that could turn vision into reality. They didn't need to be a couple to build something together. They just needed to be willing. And for the first time in a long time, she felt willing. She also felt something else. Hope. Not the flashy, headline-grabbing kind she used to chase in boardrooms, but the quiet, stubborn kind that grows in hospital rooms, in shared coffee cups and crooked watercolor birds. The kind that says, "You're not done yet." One evening, as they walked slowly back from dinner, her with her cane, him with his, they passed a bulletin board in the hallway. Someone had pinned up a flyer. "Local business grants, apply now." She stopped. He stopped with her. Neither of them said anything. But they both looked at the flyer, then at each other, and in that silent exchange, a new chapter began to write itself. Not in grand declarations, but in the quiet certainty that sometimes the most powerful partnerships start with a cup of bad coffee and a whispered plea in the dark. The day they were both cleared for discharge arrived faster than either of them expected. It wasn't marked by fanfare or celebration, just a quiet morning with packed suitcases by the door and discharge papers neatly folded on the bed. The rehab center had been a cocoon of sorts, a place where time moved differently, where pain was acknowledged instead of ignored, where two broken people found each other in the quiet hours between therapy sessions and lukewarm meals. Now, the real world waited outside. She stood by the window in room 314, watching rain slide down the glass. Her penthouse downtown felt like a museum now, sterile, beautiful, empty. She'd spoken to her assistant the day before. The company had named an interim CEO. They'd offered her an emeritus advisor role. Fancy words for a seat at the table with no real voice. "We'd be honored to have your guidance," the email read. But she knew what it meant. "We appreciate your past contributions. Please don't interfere." She wasn't angry, just tired. Tired of performing. Tired of being valued only for what she could produce, not who she was. Across the hall, he was folding the last of his daughter's drawings into his duffel bag. His sister had texted that morning, "Lily's excited to have you home, but the house, it's still half finished. Roof's leaking again." And the kitchen sinks backed up. He'd stared at the message for a long time. He wanted to go home. Desperately. But the thought of facing a broken house with a broken leg and no income made his chest tight. They met in the hallway, each with their bags, their canes, their unspoken worries. "Ready?" he asked. She almost laughed. "Not really," he nodded. "Me neither." They took the shuttle together to the parking lot where his sister's old pickup waited. The rain had let up, leaving the air damp and cool. She had a car service coming for her in 20 minutes, but she didn't mention it. Instead, she stood with him under the awning, watching droplets fall from the roof. "I keep thinking about that flyer," she said suddenly. He looked at her. "The business grant one?" "Yeah." She turned to face him. What if it wasn't just a flyer? What if it was a sign? He frowned slightly. "I don't know if I believe in signs." "I didn't either," she said. "But I believe in timing, and I believe in people who show up when you're falling apart." She took a breath. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said about building homes, not just houses, about creating spaces where people feel safe." He listened, quiet, eyes steady. "I have savings," she continued, "more than I need. And I know how to run a business, how to plan, budget, hire, market. What I don't know is how to build a kitchen or fix a roof." She looked him straight in the eye. "But you do." His breath caught. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying," she said, voice firm now. "What if we started something together? A small renovation business. You handle the work, the craftsmanship, the crews, the client relationships on site. I handle the back end, finances, contracts, scheduling, permits. We keep it local. Start small. Maybe just kitchens and bathrooms at first. See where it goes." He stared at her, stunned. "You'd invest in me?" "I'd invest in us," she corrected gently. "Not as charity. As partnership. Equal say, equal risk. Equal reward." He looked down at his hands, calloused, scarred, still healing. "I don't have any money to put in." "You have your skill," she said. "That's worth more than cash right now. And you have your integrity. I've watched you for weeks. You help people without expecting anything back. You show up even when it hurts. That's the kind of foundation a business needs." He was quiet for a long time. Rain began to fall again, soft and steady. Somewhere down the street a dog barked. A car passed, tires hissing on wet pavement. Finally he spoke. "I've spent my whole life working for other people, building their dreams while mine sat on a shelf. I always thought I'd start my own thing someday, but someday kept getting pushed back. Maybe someday is now," she said. He looked at her, not as the powerful CEO she once was, but as the woman who cried alone in the dark and still found the strength to help him draft an insurance letter, the woman who painted a crooked bird and kept it on her wall, the woman who showed up every morning with quiet courage. "What would we call it?" he asked, a small smile tugging at his lips. She thought for a moment. "Something honest. Something that says we're in this together. How about Johnson and Martinez?" he suggested, using their last names for the first time out loud. She smiled. "Too formal. Then what?" She looked at the rain, then back at him. "How about Together Built?" He considered it. Nodded slowly. "Yeah, I like that. Because it's true. Nothing worth having is built alone." Just then her car pulled up, a sleek black sedan. The driver got out and opened the trunk. She didn't move right away. "So, is that a yes?" He took a deep breath. "It's a yes, but only if you promise not to disappear back into that penthouse and forget this conversation." "I won't," she said, "because I finally have something worth staying for." He reached out and shook her hand, firm, warm, real. "Then we start Monday." She got into the car. As it pulled away, she looked back through the rear window. He was still standing there, duffel bag at his feet, watching her go. But this time neither of them felt alone. The next few days were a whirlwind. She didn't go back to her penthouse. Instead, she rented a small furnished apartment near the city's east side, closer to where he lived, closer to where they'd eventually open their office. It had hardwood floors, big windows, and a kitchen that needed updating. "Perfect," she'd said with a grin when she showed him the listing. "Our first project," he moved back in with his daughter. The house was messy, the roof did leak, and the sink was indeed clogged. But the moment he walked through the door, Lily ran to him, arms wide, and buried her face in his chest. "You're home," she cried. He held her tight, breathing in the smell of her shampoo, feeling like he could finally exhale. That night, after Lily was asleep, he sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and pen. He wrote down everything he knew about running a small renovation business: tools needed, local suppliers, trusted subcontractors, common pitfalls. He didn't know spreadsheets or marketing, but he knew quality. He knew how to treat clients like neighbors, not transactions. Meanwhile, she dove into research. She studied local business licenses, insurance requirements, zoning laws. She reached out to a former colleague who now ran a small design firm. No mention of her past title, just a simple ask. "Do you know anyone looking for reliable, honest home renovations?" The answer was yes. 2 referrals came within 48 hours. On Monday morning, they met at a diner halfway between their places. Over coffee, real coffee this time, not hospital sludge, they laid out their plans. "We'll start with those 2 jobs," she said. 1 kitchen remodel, 1 bathroom update. Small scope, manageable timeline. "We'll do the work ourselves, no crews yet. Keep costs low," he nodded. "I can handle the demo, framing, tiling. You handle client communication, ordering materials, payments. And we split profits 50-50, she added. No exceptions, he looked at her. "You trust me that much?" "I wouldn't be here if I didn't." They shook on it again. No lawyers. No fancy contracts. Just 2 people who'd seen each other at their worst and still believed in each other's best. The first job was for an elderly couple who'd lived in their home for 40 years. Their kitchen hadn't been updated since the 1980s. Yellowed linoleum, avocado green appliances, cabinets that stuck when you tried to open them. The wife had tears in her eyes when she showed them around. "My husband can't stand much longer," she said softly. "We need something safer, easier." He listened carefully, taking notes. She asked thoughtful questions about their routine, their needs, their budget. That night, they sketched a simple layout together at her kitchen table. Wide aisles for a walker, pull-out shelves, non-slip flooring. He suggested soft, close drawers so fingers wouldn't get pinched. She found affordable, durable materials that wouldn't break the bank. Work began the following week. The first day was hard. His leg ached by mid-morning. She fumbled with the tile cutter, slicing her finger. They argued over paint samples. She wanted neutral tones. He thought the couple deserved a little joy, so they compromised on a warm sage green. But by lunch, they'd found a rhythm. He demowed the old cabinets while she organized deliveries. She ran to the hardware store for extra screws while he measured for new countertops. They ate sandwiches on the back porch, too tired to talk but comfortable in the silence. At the end of the week, the couple came by to check progress. The wife gasped when she saw the new layout. It's exactly what we needed," she whispered. Her husband looked at him. "You listened?" He just nodded. "It's your home. You should feel heard." That night, over takeout pizza in her apartment, she said, "We did good today." "We did," he agreed. "Really good. There was no fanfare. No press release. Just 2 people who'd been knocked down, choosing to build something new, together. And for the first time in a long time, both of them felt like they were exactly where they were meant to be. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the front window of a small storefront on East 6th Street, catching dust motes dancing in the air. The sign above the door, hand-painted on reclaimed wood, read, "Together Built." Below it, in smaller letters, "Homes renovated with care." Inside, the space was modest but warm. A second-hand desk sat near the window, covered in blueprints, fabric swatches, and a coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest Business Partner." A workbench lined the back wall, cluttered with tools, paint cans, and a half-finished birdhouse that a client's grandson had started during a site visit and left behind. On the wall hung 2 framed photos, one of a crooked watercolor bird, and another of a little girl grinning beside a newly tiled bathroom. Holding up a thumbs up, she stood by the door, adjusting the sign one last time. Her right hand still didn't have full strength, but she could hold a hammer now. She could carry a box of tiles. She could write her name without hesitation. More importantly, she could laugh without bracing for the next crisis. He was already inside, sweeping sawdust off the floor. His limp was barely noticeable now, though he still used a cane on long days. He'd traded his rehab sweatpants for worn jeans and a flannel shirt with the company logo stitched on the pocket. A logo they'd designed together over late-night pizza. 2 hands, one steadying the other, forming the shape of a house. Their first client of the day was due in an hour. A young couple expecting their first baby, wanting to convert a spare room into a nursery. Simple job. But to them it wasn't simple. It was trust. It was hope. It was another family choosing to believe in two people who'd once been told they were broken beyond repair. As he swept, he glanced at her. Nervous? She shook her head. Just grateful, he smiled. Me too. It hadn't been easy. The first few months were a crash course in humility. There were days the bank account dipped dangerously low. Days when a supplier delivered the wrong materials. Days when a client changed their mind 3 times and still wasn't happy. There were moments, late at night after Lily was asleep, when he wondered if he'd made a mistake, if he was dragging someone else down with him. And there were nights she lay awake, staring at the ceiling of her new apartment, wondering if she'd traded one kind of pressure for another. Was this really better than the boardroom? Was this enough? But then something would happen. Like the day an elderly client slipped him a jar of homemade peach jam with a note. Thank you for treating my home like it matters. Or the time she overheard a subcontractor tell a new hire, work with them? Yeah, they're fair. Pay on time. Respect your time. Rare these days. Or the afternoon Lily came to the office after school, sat at the desk with a stack of colored pencils, and drew plans for a treehouse she wanted her dad to build, complete with a slide and a secret trapdoor. She'd handed the drawing to her with solemn seriousness. You're the boss of the paper stuff. Can you make this real? She'd framed it, hung it next to the watercolor bird. Slowly word spread. Not through flashy ads or social media campaigns, though they did start a simple website, but through neighbors telling neighbors, through handshakes and honest work. People liked that they showed up on time, that they cleaned up after themselves, that they didn't cut corners, that they listened. One afternoon, a woman came in unannounced. She was in her 60s, dressed in a neat cardigan, eyes red-rimmed but determined. She'd just lost her husband. The house they'd shared for 30 years felt too big, too empty. She wanted to downsize, but first, she needed to fix the porch where they used to drink coffee every morning. It's falling apart, she said, voice trembling. But I can't bear to leave without seeing it whole again. They took the job. Not because it was profitable, it barely broke even, but because they understood. He rebuilt the porch himself, plank by plank, adding a small bench where 2 people could sit side by side. She handled the permits, sourced weather-resistant wood within budget, and even brought the woman lemonade on hot afternoons while work was underway. On the last day, the woman stood on the new porch, running her hand along the smooth railing. She didn't say much, just turned to them, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "Thank you for giving me back a piece of him." That night, over takeout in the office, neither of them spoke for a long time. Finally, he said, "We're not just fixing houses, are we?" "No," she replied softly. "We're helping people heal." And in doing that, they'd healed themselves too. Today, as they waited for the expecting couple, she made coffee, real coffee, from beans they bought at the shop down the street. He set out chairs and laid out the nursery sketches. The bell above the door jingled. A man and woman walked in, holding hands, eyes wide with the mix of excitement and terror that only new parents understand. "Hi," the woman said shyly. "We're here about the nursery?" "Come on in," she said, smiling. "We've been expecting you." They spent the next hour talking, not just about paint colors and crib placement, but about fears, hopes, the kind of home they wanted to build for their child. He asked about their routines. She asked about their budget and timeline. They listened. They took notes. They offered options, not pressure. By the time the couple left, they had a plan, a start date, and a sense of calm they hadn't had when they walked in. After they left, he leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "We're good at this." "We are," she said. "Better than I ever thought we'd be." She looked around the small office. The mismatched chairs, the tool belt hanging by the door, the photos on the wall, the faint smell of sawdust and coffee. This wasn't the empire she'd once built. It didn't make headlines. It wouldn't be featured in business magazines. But it was real. It was honest. It was theirs. Later that afternoon, Lily came by after school, backpack slung over one shoulder, cheeks flushed from running. She dropped her bag by the door and ran straight to the desk. "Did you get the email?" she asked, bouncing on her toes. What email? He asked, wiping his hands on a rag. The one from Ms. Rivera. She said my science project got first place. He scooped her up in a hug. I knew you would. What was it again? A model of a sustainable house. With solar panels and a rainwater collector? She turned to her, eyes shining. I used your office as the example. She laughed. Well, then it definitely deserved first place. Lily beamed. Then she spotted the birdhouse on the workbench. Is that done? Almost, he said. Just needs paint. I'll do it, Lily declared, already reaching for a brush. As she settled onto the floor with a palette of colors, humming to herself, the two of them watched for a moment in quiet contentment. Outside, the city buzzed, cars honked, people hurried, life moved fast. But in this small space, time felt different. Slower. Kinder. She walked to the window and looked out at the street. No skyline. No penthouse view. Just trees, sidewalks, neighbors walking dogs, kids riding bikes. He came to stand beside her. You okay? She nodded. I was just thinking. I used to believe success meant being at the top, alone, in control. She turned to him. But this is better. He didn't say anything, just reached into his pocket and pulled out a small worn key. I got the final inspection passed on the Johnson house this morning. Roof's fixed. Sinks working. Front steps are safe. He handed her the key. It's ready. She took it, surprised. For what? For you, he said simply. If you want it. It's not fancy, but it's got a porch and a kitchen that works. And it's close, 10 minutes from here. She stared at the key in her palm. It was cool, ordinary, heavy with meaning. You'd trust me as your neighbor? She asked, voice soft. I already do, he said. She looked back at Lily, now carefully painting a red roof on the birdhouse, tongue poking out in concentration, then at the sign outside that said, Together Built. This wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was the life she needed. She slipped the key into her pocket. I'll take it. That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, they locked up the office. Lily held her hand on one side, his on the other. They walked down the street together, not fast, not slow, just steady. No one spoke. They didn't need to, because the past hadn't vanished. The stroke still left its mark. The accident still ached in cold weather. The loneliness still whispered sometimes in the quiet hours, but it no longer defined them. They had built something new. Not just a business. Not just a home, but a life stitched together from broken pieces, made stronger at the seams. And as they turned the corner toward home, the city lights flickered on one by one, like stars coming alive in the dusk. Each one a reminder that even in the darkest places, light finds a way.